Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. Andrew, what's going on, man?
What is up, my guy? Things are good. You know, I could be feeling a lot better. I don't know what feels worse right now, my backside after biking 15 miles yesterday, or my hoofs heart after watching two games just, well, one get away from one team and the other just not able to hold on after Creighton held like a pretty, like, I don't even want to call it a comfortable lead because it never really felt like comfortable, but all in all, it wasn't like they were ever out of that game. Mm-hmm. And so, like, whether it was responding or whether it was containing, you just kind of felt like, okay, like, you know, either way, I could expect either of these teams to win. But I think it's my backside that hurts the worst right now. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's fair. That's an aggressive amount of biking that you got.
Well, you know, it's funny too, because my sister has like one of those like Nordic tracks. Mm-hmm. So she's like, "Hey, you want to bike in New Zealand today?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to bike in New Zealand. This sounds awesome." So I'm biking, and you know, I'm listening to my own music, and the trainer on the screen is like trying to tell me what to do and like how to keep my RPMs up to match what I'm supposed to be doing. And you know, I haven't biked in a long time. For one. Two, I haven't worked out that long in a long time. And three, by the time I was like 15, 20 minutes in, I could already feel my behind starting to burn. And then my legs just left me. I thought they were unattached at one point. And so we get to like mile 10. And so, yeah, only 5 miles left. Doesn't seem like a lot on a bike. And for a full mile, I'm biking uphill. Oof. On like a 4 incline. And then I thought, what am I doing? But I grinded it out. I finished it off. I feel good for the most part. And here I am back at it with you today.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm watching that, you know, Creighton game, I'm wondering when some of those guys' legs are going to leave them as well, because, I mean, you've got Shireman and Alexander putting in 45 minutes last night.
Not that
I mean, it's a lot. Kalkbrenner put in 42. And I'll be honest, in his last couple of games, it looks like Kalkbrenner's legs kind of may have left him already. Listen, I love Ryan Kalkbrenner. Just last week, I said he was the MVP of either of the two major conference basketball teams in Nebraska. And I still believe that's true, but he got absolutely worked by Oduro last night. And that honestly is the difference in the game. You can't give up 32 points to Josh Oduro. You just can't. And if Kalkbrenner's able to hold that to even a reasonable number, like 18 to 22, Creighton's fine and they win, right? That was a huge issue. You know, I thought that against Butler on Saturday or Friday night, still weird that they played a Friday night conference game. I thought that the Creighton defense overall struggled, but what I think I'm figuring out here, right, is that Creighton's defense is so dependent on Ryan Kalkbrenner being otherworldly that when he becomes simply even just above average, their defense looks terrible because everything is designed to funnel things to Ryan Kalkbrenner and to allow Kalkbrenner to contest shots and alter shots and block shots. But when he's not able to do that, other teams absolutely feast. And when he's not able to do that, even at a defensive player of the year level in the conference, other teams are allowed to feast. These two last defensive efforts against Butler and Providence respectively are not going to get it done for Creighton. They just cannot survive these games. And let's be totally honest here. It's not like Providence and Butler are the world's greatest offenses. Okay. Like that's where it's really concerning is these teams are letting Creighton get into shootouts. And in the past, if you let Creighton get into a shootout, you were losing, right? That was just full stop. You were losing. Creighton's lost 2 in a row of those now. And secondly, These are against teams that are not the offensive juggernauts of the Big East. This is not Marquette. I'm concerned when they play Marquette if they're still playing this way. And I think you have to look at, I think you have to look at their rotation, and you have to look at the guys getting minutes outside of the main four, because even, it's not like Mason Miller's playing a ton of minutes either. Farabello had more minutes than him coming off the bench. Outside Farabello, you're looking at Jason Green getting 4 minutes and Isaac Trout getting 3 minutes. Fred King didn't even see the floor, which he struggled at times this year. I understand that, but it seems like every other good team finds a way to steal a handful of minutes here and there for their guys that need it. You can't count on guys playing 45 minutes a night. And I know, they've had 3 overtime games in the last couple weeks, and in each of those, their main guys are playing over 40 minutes a night. That's not sustainable, especially for Ryan Kalk. Like, you might be able to get away with it with Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman, because you're not relying on them defensively the same way you are Ryan Kalkbrenner. If you want to have any shot of making a run in March, you cannot rely on Ryan Kalkbrenner for 40-plus minutes a night, because his legs just aren't there. We've seen it the last couple of games. His legs are not there to be the type of – now, maybe he's banged up a little bit. Maybe he's under the weather like we saw at times last year. I don't know. But my conclusion is that it's the fatigue that's catching up with him, which is the most logical conclusion, because he's playing 40 freaking minutes a night. Like, that's not a sustainable thing for a 7'1" guy who anchors both ends of the floor for you. That is not a reasonable ask. And that's currently what Creighton's asking of Ryan Kalkbrenner. And right now the answers they're getting is no, this is not going to work.
Well, you brought up a lot of good points there, and I'll try to kind of take everything that you said.
I got a little ranty there.
No, and put it in one single file line, because you're right. And I'll start with Kalkbrenner. Defensively, he looks tired. Yeah. And, even last night offensively, he wasn't backing down Oduro like you've seen him back down defenders before. The shots that he was taking, instead of it being closer to the low block, you're finding it like halfway up between the block and the elbow. And it's like, okay, like Kalk can still make those shots, but he's still not getting the looks he's exactly wanting on those possessions, nor was he finding the rock as much as he probably wanted to. But that also goes to the fact too, when defensively you're getting worked, as you said, dusted. That's the term I would have used. I didn't want to use the term bullied, because I think Kalkbrenner can bully just as much on the offensive side of things. But can you tell me the last time that Creighton gave up 46 points in the paint? Because I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the last time that a team scored 46 paint points on this team, especially with a guy like Kalk, who's the reigning 2-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up for the exact number. I think the word bullied is fair, though. There is a certain body type of big that Kalkbrenner does struggle with a little bit, and that is kind of the short, like the undersized guys that are big bodied. We see it with Dixon from Villanova a lot. Oduro is not as good as Dixon, obviously, but he kind of has some of the same attributes, in that he's an undersized big. He's big bodied. He can kind of catch the ball a little bit further on the perimeter and get some momentum going downhill against Kalkbrenner, and then he can get into his body, which makes blocking his shot a little bit more difficult. But it's not just the one-on-one defense on Oduro, right? It's the fact that he seems like he's a half step late in coming over to help, in coming over to contest other player shots as the help side defender. And like I said, I don't know if he's a little banged up. I don't know if he's under the weather. I don't know if he's just simply tired of seeing Creighton give up offensive rebounds, so he's trying to stick a little bit closer to his man a little bit longer, because we've seen that be an issue for Creighton this year as well. But the fact is, whatever the reason, he hasn't been as effective as the anchor of that defense recently as we've come to expect from him. And that sort of pulls the pin out of the entire defense, and the rest of it starts to fall apart. It is not a functional defense without Ryan Kalkbrenner being Big East Player of the Year good. Now, all that being said, it took a miracle shot from Devin Carter from the logo to send that game to overtime, right? So, like, all that being said, it sounds like they lost by 20, 30 points, right? No, they didn't. They lost by 1 to Butler. They lost in overtime by 4 to Providence. All that being said, Devin Carter had to hit a shot from the actual logo to send that game to overtime. So I don't want to be too negative here because I think if they can figure things out, the ceiling for this Creighton team is still really high. But the fact is they are not currently playing up to that ability because of the things we talked about defensively. And I think a lot of that comes back to Greg McDermott doesn't trust a lot of guys on this team right now. He seems to trust about 5 guys on this team, and the 5th guy isn't Mason Miller, it's Francisco Farabello. He has to be able to trust like just a little bit more to give these guys a rest.
Well, the other point to hit on here too is it's not often Creighton scores over 80 points and they lose.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not. And yes, I know that it was 78 before OT, but when you're pushing 80 points, those shootouts that you're talking about, they don't lose those games too often.
No.
It's hard to get to 80 against Creighton. And Creighton historically has been a pretty good defensive team. So it is a thing of fatigue. But why is that? And it goes back to that point that you just mentioned is you trust 4 guys. No, really, you trust 3 guys, right? Ashworth has really started to come on late in this season. But you trust 3 guys, you add in Ashworth, and then who's next? Whereas last season, you at least had 5 guys on the floor that you could trust for a majority of that game. This year, you're just not seeing that. And, maybe that sparks like a change, whether it's in practice leading up to the next game defensively for Creighton. Maybe you start seeing more of a zone look at some point defensively to maybe save some legs to keep you from moving all across the floor. I'm not saying they're just going to flip the script because I don't think that's necessary yet either. Because as you said, you have a single-digit loss to Butler. You have an overtime loss to Providence. Like it's not panic mode.
Yeah, the sky isn't falling, right? Like
but I think it's something you need to recognize in saying, okay, how long can Alexander and Shireman actually last going this deep in games? How long can Kalkbrenner last if he's not getting his usual rests and things of that nature? So the way to get around those things is by packing in your defense a little bit. You can still work fast in transition. You can still push the basketball, but maybe instead of, showing a man-to-man look and flying all around your own end of the floor, you pack it in a little bit and you play a little zone coverage. So you kind of stay in one vicinity. That it's just an idea. It's not like hey, they're going to change that going into next game. But if you're looking to save some leg, get guys maybe a little bit more healthy or just a little more fresh, that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, something has to change, obviously, right? Yeah, changing up tactics is one option in terms of, throwing some different looks at teams that may save Creighton's legs a little bit. I don't know what the answer is, honestly, because there's no easy answer. Either you have to change what you're comfortable with in terms of tactically, or you have to change what you're comfortable with rotationally, right? You have to do something you're uncomfortable with in order to try and fix this problem, because what you are comfortable with is leading to other teams putting up a whole heck of a lot of points on you. So, I liked that. I liked that Coach McDermott went to Jason Green a little bit last night. I thought he provided a lot of energy off the bench. Now he's not going to fix all your problems, right? But if you can steal, I mean, we're not even talking about a lot of time here. We're talking about like 2 or 3 minutes a half, right? If you can steal 2 or 3 minutes a half, especially for Kalkbrenner, which is all they were really asking Fred King to do before. And after looking pretty good to start the season, he seems to have regressed a little bit in that role, whether it's trying to play Trout at the 5 a little bit, which he only played 3 minutes last night, and it kind of seemed to lose those minutes out at the 4. Maybe you try Trout at the 5 a little bit. Jason Green's used to playing a little bit bigger as well. I don't know what the combination or the solution is there, but McDermott has to find a way to feel okay stealing 2 or 3 minutes a half, at least for Kalkbrenner. Like that at the very least. I mean, you don't have a ton of options in terms of giving Shireman and Alexander rest because the drop off from those guys to the next guy is pretty big. I understand it's really big from Kalkbrenner to the next guy too, but I think it's less sustainable for Kalkbrenner to play those minutes than it is for the guards. He's just a bigger body. It's a more wear and tear on him. And being totally honest here, they ask more of Kalkbrenner than they do of any other player on the floor because of what he's asked to do defensively as well as the offensive end. So, I mean, I agree. They're going to have to do something they're not real comfortable with and that they haven't really done so far this year. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it'll be really interesting to see. This is kind of where, coaches make their money. This is where coaches is making the decisions that aren't obvious, right? It's making the decisions that you have to decide which version of uncomfortable is going to work the best and which version of uncomfortable can you live with if it doesn't work out, right? That's where Coach McDermott's at right now. And, we've seen in the past that he's done a really good job in those situations. He's done a really good job when things were not comfortable and he had to try some things out. It'll be interesting to see what he tries out this year because there's no easy answers on the table.
My last point, and it's more of a question for us to maybe dig a little bit deeper into, but when Trout came over from Virginia, he was supposed to fill in that 4 spot pretty well. Like we knew he was a good shooter. We knew that he could really play into what Creighton was trying to do, but we haven't seen enough of Trout this year, or maybe we saw enough early that's why we're seeing only 2.5 minutes of game time from him. What do you think needs to be seen out of Trout going forward? Is this the expectation of who he is for this team? Is he still too new to the squad? And it's just, that's why he's taking a back seat. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah. So I think a lot of this is that last year for him at Virginia was a total waste. Like, I don't think he got any better last year at Virginia. And that's a tough year to not play and then to not get any better. Right. So I think there is some of the adjusting to the speed of the college game and still trying to get to a point where he's improved a little bit. What I think will really help is I think his, kind of like we saw Baylor last year, his body's kind of transformed from last year to this year. He looks leaner. He looks a little bit quicker. We've seen him like dunk on some people a little bit this year, which is not something we saw at all last year. Seems a little bit more athletic. I think that's what the biggest thing we need to see is Jeremy Anderson, the guy that runs their strength and nutrition, everything over at Creighton, does a really good job with players' bodies and getting them feeling right. I think that's what Trout needs more than anything, because I don't think he got any of that last year at Virginia. That being said, I always have had some concern about his ability to defend the 4 at the Big East level or at the major conference level. I always had a little bit of hesitation there because sometimes he can seem to get his feet stuck in the ground a little bit. I wonder if, and that's why I keep bringing up him as a possible small ball 5, if he is able to get strong, and he's not even that small. He's like 6'10", right? He's a big dude. This isn't like running Ethan Rogge out there at 6'7" on a good day. Like he's 6'7" the way I'm 5'11". All right, let's just put it that way. You running him out there at a 5 against the Big East, like Trout's every bit of 6'10". Like he's a big dude and can stretch the floor. If he can get comfortable defending bigs as opposed to trying to defend on the perimeter, I think that's the best path forward for him to earn significant playing time for Creighton. And with Kalkbrenner leaving next year, it could actually be a really interesting opportunity to play him and Mason Miller at the same time, where you would have a still pretty lengthy team, but a lot of floor spreading ability in your front court. So I think that could be really interesting. But to me, it's all about kind of recomposing his body a little bit, getting himself into a place where either he can be a little bit quicker and feel more comfortable guarding on the perimeter at the major conference level, or kind of shifting his focus to maybe being more of a 5 as opposed to a 4, because long term, his future is probably as a stretch 5 if he's able to play at the next level. Because if he's already struggling to guard on the perimeter in college, that's going to be even a bigger issue in the pros, right? So if he wants to have a future in basketball, the 5 spot's probably where it's at. He should probably start learning that now, because you can do a lot with the 4 spot in college. You can go small, like Creighton has a lot, and basically put a guard there. You can go all the way big and put a guy like Mason Miller there, who's kind of a tweener 3-4. There's a lot you can do there. In the pros, like you don't have as much leeway. You're not putting like a 6'4" guy very often at that 4 spot, and you're not putting a guy that can't defend on the perimeter at that 4 spot either. So that's what I think Trout a little bit needs a position change, but he also needs to fix up his body a little bit.
And I hope it's as simple as that. I hope it's as simple as just a body change and catching him up to speed, because he's got all the talent in the world. He just needs to be able to showcase that a little bit more. Now, as for Nebraska, speaking of talent, they have a lot of talent at home and not a whole lot of talent on the road. And we can call them road woes. We can call it whatever you want. But, if this team can't find a way to win on the road ever, they won't go dancing. I
think they have to get a road win to make the NCAA tournament. I think that's fair.
They just won't, because no committee is going to look at this team and say, gosh, what we see at home, it's enough to mask what we don't see out of them on the road. Like, nobody's going to say that unless they go deep in the Big Ten tournament. But again, if you go deep in the Big Ten tournament, what are you technically winning?
I mean, they're neutral, but yeah, they're away from home.
Yeah, they're away from home games, right? And that's kind of what I was getting at.
No, and that's a good point, because I genuinely do think, even if Nebraska's got the resume for it, which winning out at home, they'd be right on the bubble. I think they'd need a little help, but I think they would be right on the bubble. And depending on what some of the other conferences did and some of the other bubble teams, they'd have a real shot to get in. The problem is, you're right, it's become a narrative about them not being able to win on the road. You can't go 0 for conference on the road and expect to make the NCAA tournament. That's not a real thing, because it's become a talking point for this team. And the committee, I'm sure, is aware of it, that they're going, okay, this is an issue with this team. Let's see if they can answer that question. Because when you're on the bubble, that's all it is you've got a bunch of teams with a bunch of questions, and who has the best answers to those questions usually ends up on the right side of the bubble. If you don't have answers to the questions, and right now the question is, can Nebraska win on the road? And the answer is, well, they got that one against K-State and non-con in November or December, whenever it was, right? That's a long time ago. That's not a good enough answer to that question. They've got to do some work on the road before the season is over. Otherwise, they are going to have to maybe make the Big Ten championship game to give anybody some sort of comfortability putting them in the NCAA tournament. Coming up next, we will set up the show. We'll let you know what we've got coming on here. We've got some Super Bowl prop bets we're going to get to with our guy B. Edwards, and we've got a little list of our own that might be a little more untraditional. We've got more for Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Michigan, coming up to the 9 o'clock hour, just in Omaha and Tri-Cities until then. But we're also available on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as always. Got lots of activity going on in the group, or the not the group chat. Kind of feels like a group chat though. We get a lot of the same
about the same 7-8 people.
Yeah, we get the same kind of group of people a lot. Corey chimes in with Nebraska basketball. They need to go 6-1 for me to feel remotely comfortable, which I think is fair. I would feel pretty comfortable at 6-1, because that means you got at least 2 road wins there. But man, anything less than that, and I think you're not feeling great, because as Corey again brings up, he says, with the only one road win they had in 2018 when they got left out, that felt like a big story there. And just having one road win against kind of a mediocre Big Ten team probably doesn't get it done this year, unless you get some games in the Big Ten tournament as well. So lots of good thoughts on the YouTube channel there. this morning. Want to set up the show for you real quick. We do have Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7 coming up at 8 o'clock. Big day for Nebraska football. Even on a quiet signing day, they landed a couple of recruits, and then we got to hear Matt Rule talk for a little bit. Coming up at 8:30, we're going to, before we talk to our guy B. Edwards at 8:45, Andrew and I are going to go through some 10 wild prop bets that we've got for the Super Bowl. And Andrew compiled that list, so I can't wait. I've looked at some of them. I can't wait to see which ones that Andrew chose, because I feel like this is one of my favorite parts of the Super Bowl, are kind of the exotic bets. So I'm looking forward to that. 8:45, we'll talk to B. Edwards to get his thoughts on how he's playing the Super Bowl. At 9 o'clock, special guest for you at 9 o'clock, Mike Lombardi. He was in the NFL as an executive in player personnel scouting. He was a GM for over 30 years. He has worked in the NFL for a very long time. Now he hosts the GM Shuffle Pod. You've seen him all over sports media. Really excited to talk to Mike Lombardi at the 9 o'clock hour. And then we'll wrap up the show with some Hurrdat hot seat as well. So that's what we've got on tap for you here. Before we get into any of that, though, how are you feeling about the Nebraska basketball tournament resume as we sit right now? I know my guy Corey is feeling a little uneasy, but how do you think they need to finish this season in order for you to feel comfortable? And how realistic do you think that finish is?
I think the finish is very realistic with who they have left on their road resume, but let's not forget who just lost at Michigan last night, right before the Nebraska game started, and that was Wisconsin, who is, what do they have? Have they lost 5 in a row now? Something like that. Wisconsin, if they're not getting the job done on the road in Michigan, well, then you can't expect Nebraska just to come in and say that's the game that they're going to get. And nor have we ever said that's the one that they will get. The likeliest of all the road games left seem to be Ohio State for the good majority of the time. But, I really do have a lot of faith that Nebraska can turn it around as long as their road or their home resume continues. If they stay hot at home, at some point in time, you have to buy into momentum. And let's just take the next couple of games, for example. You have Michigan at home on Saturday. Mm-hmm. You have Penn State the following Saturday. So, yes, there's a good break in the action there, but you're looking at 2 of the bottom 5 teams in the Big Ten. You get both of those wins. You go then on the road to Indiana. And Indiana is just two spots above Nebraska. So they're pretty much neck and neck in the Big Ten standings. Then it's a Minnesota game at home. Minnesota, again, a team that is right about where Nebraska is this year. But I also don't think they should be as high as they are. I think they're actually performing better than people expected, but they could come back down to earth by the time Nebraska sees them on February 25th. And then it's Ohio State, the game that they absolutely have to win. They absolutely have to beat Ohio State February 29th. That gives you 4 games to build up momentum and then get that one on the road, because the next 2 are Rutgers and Michigan. And those are 2 of the 3 worst teams in the Big Ten. You have to get that Ohio State game, because that will continue to build momentum either going into the tournament, or you're going to have previous momentum going into that Ohio State game to show people like, hey, we can actually get this done on the road.
Yeah, Ohio State's also important because they are not playing good basketball right now. They have lost 5 in a row. Wisconsin's only lost 3 in a row, but still kind of on a little bit of a slide there. The Ohio State game is crucially important because Ohio State's not playing good basketball right now. You have to be able to get teams while they're down. You can't be the get right game for these teams. The thing that I wonder about with this stretch is not so much about Nebraska, but you mentioned that Wisconsin-Michigan game last night. Nebraska needs Wisconsin to kind of hold up their end of the bargain, right? Nebraska needs that Wisconsin, because the Purdue game is going to look like a great win no matter what, because Purdue's really, really solid. I don't think they're dropping off. Like, I have very little concerns about that. But Nebraska needs Wisconsin to kind of do their job to make that win look as good as it was at the time, right? You don't want the committee to look back and be like, that Wisconsin team was overrated at 6 at the time. Which we both kind of thought they might be, we thought maybe that's like a top 12, 15 team. Doesn't really feel like a top 5, 6 team, but that's what they were ranked at the time. Nebraska needs Wisconsin to hold up their end of the bargain here, because they need that win as kind of a staple of their resume, because let's be honest, the road wins, even if they get them, are not going to be super impressive. We laid out the list of what's left on the resume here. And ironically enough, I'm going by KenPom ratings here. Ohio State is the highest ranked KenPom team left on the schedule.
At 60,
yeah, at 67, right? Minnesota 73, and then everybody else is in the 90s. Michigan, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, and Michigan again, all in the 90s in KenPom. They don't have any real opportunities for quality wins left. These are should win games if you are an NCAA tournament team. And that's where Nebraska is going to have to take care of business. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards Corey here, where 6-1 is going to be what it's going to take to feel good going into the Big Ten tournament. Because if you lose one of these games, this isn't one of those like, losing to Illinois on the road, not a big deal, right? You can live with that.
Mm-hmm. Same with Northwestern.
Yeah, that's a top 50 team on the road. Like, you get it, right? That's fine. But if you can't get wins against these 75 to 100 teams, that's where you get into trouble in terms of your resume, because it's like, they're just a super inconsistent team. Yeah, they had some real high highs, but they have some low lows. That's not going to cut it. And especially if Wisconsin continues to slide a little bit and that win looks less and less impressive, Nebraska's really going to need to take care of business here over the last 7 games. Otherwise, they're going to have to do work in the Big Ten tournament. And that's not a place where they've done well historically.
And at what point are you not a 75 to 90 team?
Yeah.
Like that's what Nebraska has to look at themselves in the mirror and say as well.
Because right now they're in the 50s. Yeah.
At what point are we not one of these teams if we can't beat these teams? The only reason Nebraska is so high is because of those wins, like you've already talked about, because of the big resume builders. Like, they're going into a job interview right now, and they'll probably still get the job because they've conquered Purdue, they've conquered Wisconsin, they conquered K-State. Like, they will get that job. But if you fall off the beaten path, like, you can't forget that they also lost to Minnesota on the road earlier in the year. You can't forget that they lost to Rutgers. And not only did they lose to Rutgers, they completely blew that game to Rutgers.
Same thing with the Minnesota game. They had double-digit lead at Minnesota and weren't able to come through on that one either. So the interesting thing about if they're able to get a couple wins on the way out here, all of a sudden those overtime games go from being the narrative of, they can't get over the hump on the road, to like, look how competitive they are on the road. If you don't get any of those wins on the way out, it's, they can't get over the hump. If you get a couple, it's like, super competitive road team. They'll be okay. It's strange how things can change in terms of your narrative with the committee in just a couple games. Coming up next, we will wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We are also on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I want to tell you real quickly about our friends at the Omaha Supernovas. I heard, Andrew, tell me if I'm right, I heard the number was only 9,000 last night.
It was just over 9, man.
Guys, all right, we're going to have a little discussion here, okay?
It's so funny how we're like, you're about to get mad over 9,000
people. Not mad. Just disappointed. I'm like a dad of a delinquent teenager. I'm just a little bit disappointed. Listen, I'm going to give a little bit of a pass this one time, okay? It was a weeknight. There was a lot going on. Nebraska and Creighton were both playing. I know that there's a lot of love for both those teams in the area, so I'm going to give a tiny little bit of a pass. But here's what I'm going to tell you, okay? Your Supernovas are going on the road for a little bit. They're going to be road dogs here. They don't come back until a week from Sunday. So you got a little wait here before you get to see your Supernovas at home again on February 18th. I'm hoping the old saying is true that absence makes the heart grow fonder. I want that 5 digits again, all right? The 9,000, that's a one-time pass. That's not something I'm going to allow moving forward, okay? Supernovas.com. Get your tickets. Look at the schedule. They will be playing I believe it's the Orlando Valkyries, which is a very cool name. Got to give credit there. Not as cool as the Supernovas, obviously, but
What's
still
a
a cool
Valkyrie?
name.
Is that a new weather event?
It might be. We heard about the Pineapple Express yesterday. The next one they're going to name is a Valkyrie. But they will be visiting CHI Health Center Sunday, February 18th at 5 p.m. You can get your tickets now. That's just a week from Sunday here back in Omaha. They've got a couple road games that you can follow along with them between now and then. Go to supernovas.com for schedule and ticket information. I need the 10,000 at least, guys. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to yell. Nobody's getting grounded here.
Loud noises.
But I need the 10,000 on February 18th. That's all I'm saying.
That's where you're leaving it.
I would love 12. I mean, let's get above that 11,000 mark, but I need the 5 digits. All right. That's a non-negotiable. Let's get it done, guys. That is our friends over at Omaha Supernovas, supernovas.com.
The 9,000 is more than Orlando's seen all year.
Yeah. Well, we're better than Orlando, obviously. We know that.
Nah, I just made that up. I have no clue.
I don't either. I haven't looked up their attendance. What I do know is that we are better than, in terms of as a volleyball community, we're better than all the other cities in the league. All right. I feel comfortable saying that.
Just stop before you add it on to after better. Like, just say we are better.
Just we're better. Yeah. I mean, listen,
just stop there. Put a period, Ravi.
I'm an Omaha guy. We're better. All right. We're just better. This is what we're going to do here. As we wrap up the first hour here, got to a lot of Creighton and Nebraska basketball. The Supernovas, unfortunately, did drop their match last night in 5 sets. So hopefully they can do the opposite of Nebraska basketball. They can get well on the road, come back here on a little winning streak on February 18th for you. But I know that we had a big team out there. So if you want more Supernovas coverage, go check out all the Hurrdat Sports social media channels, and they will have you covered. TK is right. Super Six did just come out. We're going to ask BC about it coming up here at 8 o'clock. If you're not familiar, Super Six is the kind of media voting on who the 6 most impactful newcomers will be. I almost said freshmen there. Not all freshmen. It's all newcomers. In terms of what the voting criteria is. It's pretty loosey-goosey after that, though, in terms of the voting criteria. They like to keep it pretty open-ended so they can get leave everything up to the voters' interpretation. Andrew and I both submitted ours. We'll talk about ours tomorrow. We'll talk about it in general a little bit here with Brian Christopherson at 8 o'clock. No real surprises, though, in terms of who's number 1 on that list.
Well, maybe for Mitch Sherman, if you filled out that point of the list, and I'll give like a little bit of a tease. Mitch Sherman had Dylan Raiola at 4.
Oh, okay.
Number 1 on Sherman's list was Jamal Banks.
See, and I was surprised, and I mean, we can get into this now, I suppose.
It doesn't matter. We don't have to get into ours. We can go into ours in more detail. We can kind of just
we can do the general overview now.
Yeah, general overview before BC.
I was surprised that Jamal Banks didn't get more love because he didn't make the Super Six. He didn't make the sleeper in terms of the overall voting. I was shocked by that. I thought he was a no-brainer in terms of top 6. I didn't even think twice about putting him in the top 6. I thought that was really interesting that he didn't make the list for the overall voting. I thought Dowdell made sense. He was in there, and we can go over the list real quick. It's Raiola 1, Carter Nelson 2, Grant Bricks 3, Caleb Benning 4, Dante Dowdell 5, and Micah Mazuka 6. And then there were some sleepers thrown in there as well. I was a little surprised. I was very surprised Jamal Banks didn't make that list.
Well, so the reason I'm not as surprised as you is because I didn't think the wide receiving room that bad last year. I think they actually performed a lot better than people probably realized, and that it's the fact that poor quarterback play didn't really showcase that. So I didn't think the wide receivers were in all that bad of position going into this season. Do I think they needed some veterans in the room? Yes. Did Nebraska do a great job in filling up that room? Absolutely. But because it wasn't like a strong pressing need, that's why I kind of retracted on putting a wide receiver, at least in mine. Because I went with more where are the flaws in this team, for one, and then two, where do I see a lot of boom in certain young guys, and then that's how I kind of compiled my list. But that's what I did last year too. Gunnar Gatula was my number one last year, and I only did freshmen last year. So I went up and down the list of, okay, well, offensive line is where they need the most help. So that's why he was my number one. So, that's the beauty of the Super Six, because if you get into the mind of the media, everybody's thought process is different. And so that's at least my only way to back up not including Banks in mine, is because I didn't think the wide receivers were all that bad last year.
So I think two things are true at the same time. I kind of agree with you that I like a lot of the pieces they have in the wide receiver room. They're also pretty unproven. I think there's really good upside there. I do think it was really important for them to get a guy that had performed at a major conference level, which is what Jamal Banks is. I think he's kind of he's the bridge to the production that we both think that these young guys can have. So I agree with you in theory that the wide receiver group can be a good group. I also think that it needed help, and that Jamal Banks is a huge part of that help. I think in this year, Jamal Banks probably puts up better numbers than probably any of the guys that are returning from last year. Long term, I still really like those guys, and I still expect them to make a pretty big jump this year. I just think Jamal Banks is really good. The other thing that you said that's also very true, it's impossible to separate wide receiver production and play from what we saw from the quarterback group last year, right? Yes, you had a ton of injuries in the wide receiver room. Yes, you had really young guys playing and that were really inexperienced. You also had really tough times at the quarterback spot, and that's putting it as kindly as possible. Really tough times at the quarterback spot. So I agree with your theory in principle. I still think Jamal Banks is going to be one of the most productive Huskers that we see this year. And I think that's why they put such a focus on going out to get him. That being said, I do understand your underlying principle of not including him. And, I think that's not maybe as egregious as not putting Raiola one. Like, I can't come up with an explanation for not. And I love Mitch. Like, I think Mitch is a super smart and does a really good job. I can't come up with a really good argument for not having Raiola one.
Well, nor can I. And, unless it was something like, and I could see Mitch doing this. Well, Raiola is everybody's one. And like, we all know that he should be number one. So let's include some other pieces. And then, but that you run into some dicey waters there when you still include him on your list. Like, you could create an explanation at the end saying, we all know Dylan Raiola is the number one, yada, yada, but here's 6 other guys who I think are going to make bigger impacts. But the idea of the Super Six isn't, hey, beat around the bush, take away somebody just because he's a guarantee, or at least I'm going to use that term loosely, that you expect him to be the guarantee. But when you see him included at 4, I would really, really love to hear his thought process on that. And it's unfortunate that we don't have him on today, because normally he's our Thursday guy, but he's every other week.
Yeah, no, today would have been the perfect day to have him, because I am interested in his thought process, because just because I can't come up with a good explanation doesn't mean a good explanation doesn't exist. I just think it's maybe overthinking it too much to not put Dylan Raiola at 1.
He was the only one, right?
I think there is, in the chat, they're saying there were 2. And I don't know who the other person was. I assume Mitch admitted it, or admitted that he was. That's how he was one of the ones that didn't put Raiola at 1.
I'm scrolling through right now. Oh, Jake Sorensen put Carter Nelson at 1.
Oh, well, okay. Uh, so one guy that I thought was a little bit surprising is in the Super Six, and I get that he's a really highly touted guy, I was a little bit surprised at Grant Bricks at 3, and especially above Micah Mazuka, because typically you just don't see freshman offensive linemen making a huge impact. Go ahead.
No, you bring up a great point, because I put Gatula at 1 last year. That's why I kept Bricks off my list this year, for that same reason.
Coming up next, we'll talk to Brian Christopherson. We'll jump a little bit more into this Super Six from Husker 24/7. That's coming up here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good, guys. How are you?
We are doing well, just spending a little bit of time in the Super Six that you guys put out this morning. We'll get to some Nebraska basketball too, but I wanted to start here because we were just talking about it in the previous segment. I know you had Dylan Raiola at 1. There were a couple guys that didn't. Can you come up with an explanation for me? And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. For the guys that didn't put Dylan Raiola at 1, can you kind of understand a line of thinking that would get them there?
They need to answer from you under intense questioning, I would say. No, I'm messing with them. I do have a little bit of an echo in my phone. I just wanted to let you guys know I'm having a little trouble.
Okay, no worries, BC. We appreciate you working through that with us here. In the final, Jamal Banks was not included in the did not make the cut on the voting for the Super Six. Were you surprised at all that a guy that I think people have pretty high expectations from did not make the cut there?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. In his case and some of the transfers, I wonder if some people left him off because they're only going to be in the program a year or two. Sometimes guys like to do it the more traditional way, where you pick someone who has about 4 seasons. So that might have been the reason on that one. But Micah Mazuka did get in there, I saw. And as we heard from Matt Rule the other day, he's got some work to do. So we'll see if some people maybe wish they had a different vote than they had.
Now, BC, my favorite on this list is always the sleeper, because you can look at the Super Six and just think, okay, a majority of people are probably saying the same thing, but when you get to the sleeper, it's just like, okay, that's the long shot. Everybody just kind of just throws something at the wall and hopes it sticks. You landed on Donovan Jones. Why?
I think he falls into the sleeper category for sure, because he hasn't been talked about as much, as some of the other guys. And I love what he did his senior season at Omaha North. I mean, he was just a playmaker. He had to play in a state title game where he makes an incredible catch, like in overtime, to help his team win. I know this coaching staff fell in love with him when he showed up to the summer camp, and he just he wowed them. And I thought he just put it up on film his last year and can be a versatile guy in the defense. So what's interesting about the sleeper is everybody's got like a different sort of interpretation of what that represents. And somebody's sleeper is sometimes somebody's like 3rd or 4th guy on the list. So that's always kind of fun. But Donovan Jones, to me, is like a true sleeper. I don't think he gets as much love in the class as some others. But I mean, I was joking for anybody who didn't pick Dylan Raiola, by the way. I understand that opinions are making it go around. I don't know if we've ever had a unanimous pick at number 1, so that would have been a first, I think. But everybody on there has got something to prove, whether you're Dylan Raiola, who's the most highly touted guy, or to your question, one of the sleepers like a Donovan Jones, or a Braylon Prude or somebody like that. You all got to do it at a different level now than high school, and whatever you're rated before, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the beauties of it.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson of Husker 24/7. BC, one of the more interesting names that you included on your list was Willis McGahee. I am intrigued by him a lot, but give me a little bit of your thinking of why you included him.
I wanted to bring in one of the Miami guys, and he was sort of my favorite throughout the cycle, just in talking to him and the confidence he has. I think he's a determined guy in the sense that whenever I would interview him, he would always get asked by other people about his dad and all that, and he loves his family. But I understand this. Guys like him have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because every story that gets written about him, it feels like during the recruiting process, is always like son of a NFL star, hurricane legend, stuff like that. It's like attached to every article or within the first 5 or 6 sentences of every story about them. And I was talking to him about that in December, and he's just like, I just want to carve my own path. It's not, he's thankful for the way his family has been behind him and all that, but he wants to make his own way on the football field. He's excited to do it on a different side of the ball than his father did, playing linebacker. I think there's an opening for one of the young backers to maybe force their way into the 2 deep, whether it be him or like Vincent Shavers is already gaining weight and I think enjoying himself here. So I thought it was kind of between him and Shavers. I like both of them, and I ended up just going with McGahee because I sort of had a better feel for a longer time about him than Shavers, who I just sort of got to know at the end of the recruiting process. So that was my reasoning. When you get to 5 or 6, it's always tough for me because there's like 3 or 4 or people I could put in there. Like I didn't have Caleb on mine, Caleb Benning, and I think Caleb's like a surefire, like going to contribute guy in this program. So, no, and I'm not covering my tracks because of Damon. I actually think that, but my point is, I always get when I get to like 5 through 9 on that list. If anybody does the exercise, I think there's always somebody like, oh man, I wish I could have him there, But you got to cut it off somewhere, I guess.
Well, BC, we heard from Coach Rule yesterday, and he mentioned something about the quarterbacks and maximizing reps at all positions, and that's kind of been his thing since his arrival. The ones that probably need the most reps are those quarterbacks. However, we all know the guy would do the job, and if it's not him, then the state may burn down. In terms of maximizing those reps, though, what are you hoping to see from Rail? You can firstly eyes on him in spring.
I've always said, it's hard in the spring for fans and media to get their fill or get exactly what they need to be satisfied or think like things are just going to turn the corner. But, the time we do get to see this team, the spring game, I've always cautioned people, like, don't overread into it. Be careful with it. And yet at the same time, I would say right now, when they get to that spring game in April, you want to see a cleaner version of the offense than you saw a season ago, while understanding it's kind of vanilla still. They're working through things. But if you remember, last year's spring game actually was sort of a setup of things to come. And at the time, you could kind of wave your hand at it and say, well, it's April, it's fine, they'll get it figured out. But turnovers and just like unforced errors were a big part of it. And in previous scrimmages last spring, you heard the same thing. Like Rule would come in and really like the intensity of guys, but they were having turnover issues and fumbling snaps and stuff like that. And it ends up, translating to September right away, and they never really got over it. So I would just want to see like when we get our opportunities to put eyes on it, hopefully a little bit cleaner operation where they have some stuff they feel comfortable about. The unforced errors are a little bit less. And if there are turnovers, which there will be, it's, half the time it's more of a great play by the defense than just here you go. So that's one of the biggest things is you want to kind of hear like a cleaner spring, not just in the spring game, but when Rule talks to the media about scrimmages and things like that.
BC, it's kind of funny because I agree with you that you can't put too much stock in the spring game. You don't want to read too much into it and all that. But you're also right in that the spring game offense played out almost exactly how the regular season offense did last year. So it's kind of hard to talk out of both sides of my mouth with that. But I wanted to touch on something else that Rule said yesterday. He's talking about, he got asked about the walk-on class, and he talked a lot about how, he was a walk-on and a lot of the coaching staff is former walk-ons, and how he thinks there's maybe 3 or 4 walk-ons in this class that will end up being starters one day. Obviously, there's a couple guys that had scholarship offers of other places that chose to walk on at Nebraska. But when he says something like that, are there some names that pop to the front of your mind in terms of guys you think might fit that mold?
They've got some really interesting guys like that are technically not walk-ons that or they technically are walk-ons, but basically would be scholarship guys anywhere else, like you mentioned. And Prescott, Kamir Prescott is actually not like a scholarship guy at the moment, and that's a steal, like in the class. And like we're in a weird time. I guess where I would take this question is, we used to be really fired up about like the 85-man roster, and I know people still kind of pay attention to it. And Rule was joking about how, like, he gets stopped on the streets, like, how are you going to fit the numbers, and stuff like that. To me, it's diminished in its value to us on the outside of like what the difference is between a guy who has a scholarship and a guy who's on NIL money and a guy who isn't, maybe just a walk-on guy. But, Riker Evans is an interesting athlete. Like, if you're talking about just like pure walk-ons, he's like guys like that who just like put up a lot of numbers at lower levels are always intriguing. Like Rowdy Bauer, an athlete at Norfolk. Those guys sometimes just pop up out of nowhere, and suddenly in like their second or third year, they're making plays. But then there's like Jordan Ochoa, like the edge defender from, out of Colorado. And he'd be a scholarship guy at a lot of places. And I would classify him in that walk-on category at the moment. But I like the fact that it's hard to tell now. I like that the lines are blurred between who's what a little bit, because that's sort of the way it should be. That's the way Nebraska has always thrived, honestly, even though we did have the 85 in front of us. It was always kind of cool when, you saw players come up who's like, yeah, that guy, I forget he's even a walk-on, like John Bullock, like, oh yeah, he was a walk-on, guys like that. I think they have shown that there is a path to playing under this staff. And the staff doesn't really give two figs about how you came in and what your label was. It's just like, what can you do when you get on the field and run with your opportunity?
BC, Nebraska has the 18th ranked recruiting class in the country. And I got asked this last night. Think that actually means something, or is it just a number?
It's just a number for now. I mean, it always feels good to have a top 20 class. We've seen it before. We've seen other coaches get top 20, top 25 classes, and now you got to develop and you got to win some more games. And I've always said, what would that recruiting class be like? Not that the staff cares about their rankings. I don't think they do that much, but like, let's say Nebraska won 9 games. Like, where could they maybe get this class in, could they be like more in that top 15 category with some guys? You kind of wonder that. But I've always said, going back to the Pelini era, if they're in the top 25, they've given themselves, I think, usually enough material, and they've had it to have a shot to win their share of games. It's just a matter of can that guy get better from his first to second year? And then by his fourth year, you think like, yeah, he's really, every year I've seen that guy get better. And I think for too long, Nebraska was stagnant there. Like there'd be good 3-4 star recruits, and you might see some flashes early, and then it felt like it kind of just evened out for them. And this is where you want to see, like, I thought it was encouraging, like last year, like Bryce Benhart, who was a big time recruit when he came out long ago, and it felt like he'd been kind of on the same plane for a while. And then last year was really good. You know, I thought it was a big step for him under this staff with conditioning and nutrition and just his play on the field. So you're hoping that that's a sign, like guys like him developed, and now you're going to see it in younger players. And we'll be able to tell in the trenches within a year or two, because there's some really promising players you would have high hopes for on the O-line and D-line. It's just a matter of what do those guys look like in a couple of years. We don't have to see them all right away now, but you want to hear a little bit about them, and then in a couple of years see that they're contributing in some way.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. All right, BC, we're going to change gears here on you to go to Nebraska basketball. We've talked a lot about the season in general, what's left on the schedule. Obviously, there are road woes and all of that this morning. We haven't gotten a ton into the game itself, so that's where I want to start with you. Obviously, things got off the rails pretty early against Northwestern, and they were never really able to get things back on track. In your mind, as you're watching that, what went wrong for Nebraska that they weren't able to correct?
I didn't have any trust that they could get a defensive stop, really. And even when they did force a miss, if you look at the offensive boards, they were stacking up even by the first or second media timeout. Like Northwestern had like 4 or 5 already on the offensive glass by the 8-minute mark. Ended up 13-3 in offensive rebounds favoring Northwestern. Then you compile that with Nebraska having 17 turnovers. And I think at one point it was like 22-0 points off turnovers. It ended up, I think, 26-7, but it was just a landslide there. So Hoiberg always talks about the big two, turnovers, rebounding, win one, and you at least got a chance. Nebraska didn't win either. And so you got the result you did. And I just felt like defensively and on the glass, for whatever reason, this crew just struggles. You know, Illinois obviously was a down the wire game you wish you had in your pocket now, but in that most every other one, it feels like it's been pulling teeth to try to get some rebounds. And you know, it was just a sloppy game too by Nebraska. Like the 17 turnovers, some of them were just careless, you know, like lazy passes that get intercepted for dunks, and trying to one-hand catch stuff and without authority, and they take it away. And then Boo Buie got his revenge, you know, and I was a little worried about that for Nebraska because they had shut him down the first game, and he's too good of a player usually to get twice. And he was ready for Nebraska, and he let them know about it too a little bit.
BC, 4 out of the next 7 are at home. Thank goodness. But let's scenario build. Yeah. Fill in the blanks. The Huskers go dancing if, and the Huskers won't go dancing if.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think they go dancing if they win. I feel good if they win 6 more games. And I'm not saying 6 of 7. I'm saying 5 of 7 and 1 in Minneapolis at the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 5 of 7, I'm feeling okay about things. Like they got a good shot. I mean, it's going to be interesting though. It's a good question because like there's wins that you hope hold up well. Like, you know, Purdue is going to, and I was feeling pretty good about Wisconsin holding up, but you know, they're on a skid now. And if they kind of just keep going that way, you worry about what quad certain wins fall under and all that stuff. But hopefully they get their act together. Kansas State getting their act together would help things, which obviously beating Kansas was good the other night, but they had been on a losing streak. So I think 5 of 7 though for Nebraska, and they just got to worry about themselves. And really, they gotta lock up the vault, and I think they gotta put away the narrative that they can't win one game on the road. there's a lot of teams in the country that struggle to win away from home, and they only win a couple maybe in their conference. But right now, what's attached to Nebraska is that offer. And if Nebraska had even one of those games, that they, Rutgers, Minnesota, Illinois, take your pick, it'd be a different conversation, I feel like, even this morning. It's all is not lost. I told people before this 4-game stretch that just finished, like, this is dangerous, and I was worried they might be 5-8. They're 6-7 in the league, but you got to go home, and you can't expect anything's a given. You can't just say, oh, Michigan's had a tough go of it this year. Those are 2 wins. Like we saw last night, Michigan, as bad as it's been for them, they've got material on their roster. On a given night, they can beat somebody like they beat Wisconsin. So Nebraska's got to come to ball out Saturday. And then they get a bye sort of until they play for a week, and you get a chance to get your legs under you, and then you got to roll. But they got to like really have a determined like couple of days and understand, and then almost treat it like season's on the line, guys. Like you got to go get this one, not get a scab against Michigan heading into this break. And if you're 7-7 in the league, then people feel a little bit better. And then, got to beat Penn State, Minnesota, and Rutgers at home. The road games are Ohio State and Indiana. So you got Michigan. Those are 3 games where maybe you can win 2 of those 3. It sets up that way, but you just can't look at it like this is going to be easy. You got to go into every game like it's like it is Wisconsin or Purdue on the other side against you.
BC, I'm curious, are you more encouraged or discouraged by the fact that a lot of what went wrong in the loss to Northwestern last night was not necessarily like shot making, stuff like that, but maybe more focus and effort things? They looked pretty sluggish. You mentioned the kind of sloppiness on passes. I mean, Northwestern jumped a ton of passing lanes last night, and pretty easily so. Those are fixable things theoretically, but is that a concern for you that some of those things have started to fall apart?
A little bit. I'll be honest. I'm not making excuses for him. I wasn't that surprised last night. I didn't like it going in, like how this set up. Like you had a team in Northwestern where it felt like their backs were to the wall a little bit and had to win at home. You had a determined like top point guard in the league who was like ready to show out after, Nebraska got him the first game. And then you had Nebraska coming off a short prep, where they almost had it against Illinois in a very emotional game. A lot of stuff lined up that the performance didn't surprise me. I don't think it's lack of effort ever with these guys. I know sometimes it can appear that way in sports, like when you're just sloppy and you're not quite, as speedy as you need to be with how you pass the ball and how you handle it on offense. I just think like sometimes they pay a price, and it seems to happen, especially on the road. And we've talked about it, for not having maybe that true point guard. And it goes back to, they thought they had that true point guard, like in Aaron Eulis, when they got him, and he's not available right now. He's still on this team, but not available this year. And, without him and like sort of that steady, like he's a natural at this position guy, I just think there's a price to be paid for it sometimes on the road, and it feels like and teams know that they want to pressure Nebraska heavy and make sure, like how can you really handle the ball? Like how are your handles? Bryce Williams or whomever. Like let's put the heat on you and see, and occasionally it led to some disruptive things. And last night it was just too constant with it. So it was a very disappointing game. And yet this morning they have to be like moved on completely, like even right now. I think their mind has to be like, all right, there's 7 games left in this regular season. We're supposed to be the favorite in most of these games. Let's go prove that's a true thing.
Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. We appreciate your time. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And before we get started here, I want to tell you remind you, I guess, because I've been telling you for a while about how to make sure you are qualified for that Warhorse Sportsbook $100,000 prop card challenge and $20,000 grand prize drawing as part of the Warhorse Festival of Games. If you have any questions or you can't, you're more of a reader than a listener, go to warhorsecasino.com for all the details. But you should already have all your entries built up from the past month. All you need to do now is take that rewards member card to the casino in Lincoln, swipe that thing, and validate your entries. That way, when you go 25 for 25 in the prop card challenge, you have your opportunity to win $100,000. Man, you go 25 for 25 and don't validate that thing, you're going to be kicking yourself, all right? So don't be that guy. Make sure you get to the casino in Lincoln, validate those entries with your Warhorse Rewards member card, and get that thing done. That is warhorsecasino.com if you have any questions on how to do this, or they can help you out at the casino in Lincoln. That's Warhorse Casino, Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. You can't do that in Omaha, but you can always go over to 6303 Q Street at Horseman's Park and, maybe play some of these Super Bowl bets, maybe some of these props that we're talking about. Andrew, I know you compiled a list. Props and exotic bets are where you live. So let me hand it over to you. Let's start going through some of these exotic prop bets for the Super Bowl. Oh, you're on mute, bud.
I think exotic is saying it nicely. See, the mute button gets me every time. At least twice a week.
Once a show.
At least twice a week. I think you're putting it nicely by saying exotic, though, because some of these bets are just outrageous.
Love it.
And the first one here, if it happens, you'll be set for life.
Okay.
Even if you put $1 on it.
What do we got?
You will be set up for life. Las Vegas is invaded by aliens, and the game ends in a tie.
Wait, so hold on.
That is a prop bet.
No, hold on. So does the game have to be tied when Las Vegas is invaded by aliens? Because if they're just invaded by aliens and the score is like 7-0, that doesn't end in a tie. That's just a postponement or something, right?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's something similar to like the DeMar Hamlin game where both teams were just like,
we're not playing this.
We're just not playing this game. And so that's at least how Bovada is showcasing this bet. There's a 0.1% chance that aliens will invade Las Vegas.
Honestly, that seems high even. The 0.1 seems high.
So if you were to lay, what's that, $1? Is that plus $1 million odds, plus 100,000, something crazy like that?
I think you're in good shape, though.
You know what? And that's the bet that's going to hit, right? That's like the 80-1 horse at the Kentucky Derby that hit 2 years ago. It's going to be this bet.
Okay, so is that the most extreme bet on the list? I hope so.
That is the most extreme, but some of these are close seconds. Like I don't know, Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift announced they're having a baby.
So hold on real quick. The amazing Daniel on Twitter says Vegas knows things, which is true. He says the fact that they made a tie a part of it tells me that aliens are definitely going to invade. It's just a matter of what the score is when they invade. That's hilarious. Amazing Daniel. Sorry, continue.
That's the one that's going to hit. So are Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift going to announce they're expecting a baby? Well, there's a 4.8% chance of that happening.
According to the Vegas odds? Okay. All right.
Is Taylor Swift going to join Usher during the halftime show and sing Shake It Off if the Chiefs are losing, and then it leads to a Chiefs win?
Okay. All right.
There's a 0.4% chance of that happening. Ravi, there's a better chance that they announce that they're expecting a baby than Taylor Swift going on stage at halftime and singing.
Yeah, I have to disagree with that. I have to say that it's more likely that she ends up singing on stage. Because even if she is pregnant, the fact that I have no idea, right? This is all ridiculousness, right? But even if that's true, the chances of her actually announcing that during the Super Bowl or after the Super Bowl, I mean, come on, get out of here.
And then you have before I get to some of the classics, I got a couple more here. What will happen to the price of Bitcoin during the Super Bowl?
I like how they do these things. They're just like totally unrelated.
Yeah. And Bitcoin going up is a favorite right now.
Ooh, interesting.
So if you have Bitcoin, congratulations. That's minus 125.
All the crypto bros going to get busy during the Super Bowl.
Well, that's how they're getting people to buy in, just like how they got a lot of Swifties to buy in. Speaking of Swifties, the Chiefs win and Taylor Swift goes to the White House with the team and endorses Biden. That is a prop bet right now, which I don't know how easy that is to track, because I know it's a future bet, right? Like it's like betting on a national champion, but like what qualifies as endorsing Biden? Can it be something on like social media?
I think the way it's said, then she would have to do it during the White House trip to celebrate the Super. That's how I hear it. So I think it all has to be like one conglomerate event, right? Where they go to the White House, Taylor Swift is there, and she gives the endorsement. Mm-hmm. I think it all has to happen in the same trip. So I don't think like a social media endorsement would count there.
Well, and you know, we've talked about this before, and we've never really gotten into it, but I think that's where a lot of the Taylor Swift hate lies, in terms of like who or what she stands for. And so when we talk about like, seeing Taylor Swift too often, which we'll get into the sports bet here of how many times she'll be shown during the Super Bowl. But I think it's less about who she is and more about who she stands for or what she stands for in people's eyes, which causes a divide there between different groups of people. Like, you know, the people that are like, hey, I don't want to see her anymore, or I want to see more of her. Like, I think it's just because of that right there, like less about who she actually is, less about the pop star that she is, and more about what she stands for. But the over under here, unless you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know what the reason is. I think a lot of people have different reasons for not necessarily liking to see her on the broadcast. I will say this: we're coming off of National Women and Girls in Sports Day yesterday, and I just have a hard time because there's so many videos that I've seen on social media and stuff like that of young girls being interested in football because of Taylor Swift. And they're not just interested in Taylor Swift. They actually become interested in football because of her. And like the positives of getting a whole new generation and a whole new demographic interested in football for, you know, whatever gets you into it. Like I started liking baseball because I watched like Sandlot and Angels in the Outfield. And it's like, yeah, there's no actual celestial beings during a baseball game, right? Like that's not happening as far as I know.
Yeah. It may happen during a football game.
Well, yeah, it might be during a football game. And we might have aliens if during a football game too. So, but you know what I mean? Like we get into sports when we're kids for the dumbest and most random reasons. And if Taylor Swift gives an entire generation of women and girls a reason to watch football when they wouldn't have normally, then I'm all for it. I do think, you know, Amazing Daniel makes a good point. I do think there's like an age thing there too, where, you know, there's probably a tipping point with age where it's like, okay, if you're above or below this age, you either get annoyed by it or you don't care or you're really into it with the Taylor Swift thing. But yeah, I just overall, like, even though I understand like not everybody's going to agree with everybody else's stances on things, but I think the positive of her getting an entire generation of people that maybe wouldn't be interested in football otherwise kind of engaged in the sport is a positive. But we can move on.
Yeah. So the over under here is 4.5 to see Taylor Swift on the screen for the Super Bowl. I think this is the easiest bet in the entire world to cash. The easiest over.
Okay. What's the number?
And here's why. 4.5.
Okay.
So Colin Cowherd ran the numbers on his show last week, and she's on screen an average of 25 seconds in a football game.
Which is not a lot, by the way, for the amount of stuff we've seen about it. Not a lot.
Right. But how often does she stay on the screen, right? There's no way she stays on the screen for more than 5 seconds.
No, it's usually pretty quick. Like, hey, Kelsey makes a catch. They show her for 2 seconds. They pop back to the thing.
So if she's shown on TV in the AFC Championship game a total of 32 seconds, and we're talking about 5 seconds per, you hammer the over.
Yeah, well, especially because, do they include, like, pregame and stuff, too? Because if they include that, it's way over.
I would guess it's like game start to game end.
Okay, fair enough. I still think the over is the smart play there. Speaking of smart plays, we're going to talk to Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider, coming up next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. You can also see us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We are talking now on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline to our friend Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. B, what's going on, man?
Good morning, gentlemen. How we doing?
Is your heat off?
Man, it's cold around here, guys.
It's been nice around here. We've been in like the 50s all week. We've got, people are wearing shorts out here, B.
Oh man, it's I think the low was 44 last night.
Oh,
wow.
I think the low here was like 36. You guys are struggling down there.
We are. Now, I will say it's been getting in the 60s in the afternoon. In fact, I went for a little walk on the beach yesterday afternoon. So it was windy. I had my fleece on, but I did have shorts on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, poor you.
Went on a little walk on the beach and it was a little chilly. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I'm tired of this conversation.
I hope you fell in the water.
B, I know that this is obviously a big week for professional bettors as yourself and handicappers, and it's probably, it's the biggest betting week of the year, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, it's the biggest one game event.
Volume, right?
Yeah, I'm a big March Madness guy, so
Sure.
That's debatable, but certainly it's one of the top ones for sure.
Let's not beat around the bush. I know you've got a play on the line and a winner here. What is your play? It's the 49ers are -2 in terms of being a favorite. What's your play on the winner on that line on the game?
Yeah, so I'm on the Chiefs and nothing real,
How dare you? How dare you?
Right. Yeah, nothing real complicated here. I just think they have the better quarterback and nothing against Purdy. And I think they have the better head coach. Nothing against Kyle Shanahan other than not running the ball enough in the second half of the only Super Bowl I've ever been to personally, and one of only 2 for my Falcons when they lost against the Patriots. But and then I think the Chiefs had the better defense. And since that debacle against the Raiders on Christmas Day when they lost outright at Arrowhead, they've won 5 in a row, both straight up and ATS. They went the road route, which they had not done during the Mahomes era. And I just think the 49ers are fortunate to be here. Now, if you're a Niners fan, I guess that's good and bad. It's bad you're not playing that great, but it's good that you haven't played your best football and you are here. But I just think the Chiefs have got more to offer than Detroit and Green Bay. And I thought both Detroit and Green Bay should have won at San Francisco. So my big bet, where like 80% of my bankroll is on the Chiefs +2. And that way I can go have fun with the props. And even if I go over on the props, I'll still have a nice profit, assuming the Chiefs cover +2.
So you mentioned the props there, B. We just got done talking about some of the crazier prop bets that aren't on every book. But the props that you stick with aren't as crazy. They may be crazy in value sometimes, but they may not be as nuts as, say, aliens invading Vegas for the Super Bowl. Now, can you share your first touchdown prop with me? Because this is something that I get so antsy about at the beginning of a game. And if I can bet on one guy, it's who?
I think it's Kelsey at 8-1 or +800. He had the first touchdown in the Ravens game. Now, he only had 5 touchdowns during the regular season, which was pretty low for him, but he's had 3 touchdowns in 3 playoff games so far, and we've seen him get double-digit targets in 2 of the 3 playoff games, and there's no reason to think that Mahomes won't be targeting him early and often. So I like Kelsey at +800 to score the first touchdown of the game.
All right, B, I know there's some other props that you are high on as well. Another one involving Kelsey and the receiving yards, and then Pacheco and his rushing yards. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go over 71.5 on Kelsey. It may be a little bit higher, 72.5 or 73.5. Now I actually haven't even looked since yesterday afternoon, but hopefully you can get it there in the low 70s on him. I like Pacheco to go over 67.5 rushing yards. Last 3 games, he's had 97, 89, and 130. And David Montgomery against San Fran's run defense had 93 rushing yards, 1 touchdown on only 15 attempts. And Aaron Jones, I didn't think got enough touches, especially in the second half when Green Bay was at San Fran. He had 108 rushing yards on 18 carries.
Now, as we kind of look across like all prop bets, some of the crazier ones are kind of the Super Bowl squares that you can come across, and those are more for like I'm just going to put a flyer of something out there for money reasons. But what kind of led you down the Pacheco road more than say the McCaffrey road?
What I just noted with the San Fran run defense struggling. I mean, the Lions ended up with 182 rushing yards on 29 carries, so that's better than 6 yards a carry. Now, Jamison Williams having that, whatever it was, like a 41, I want to say 42-yard touchdown run, certainly bolstered those stats. But Pacheco's been in good form. I think he's going to get plenty of touches. And I think the 2 weeks off helped him. He was kind of dinged up here late in the year. I mean, still producing the last 3 games, 97, 89, and 130. But I think the extra week off probably, helped him health-wise.
B, you've got I thought Andrew was going to talk to you about this one because he loves punter. Well, he loves kickers. I assumed that love extended to punters as well. But you've actually got a punting prop in here, which I don't think I've ever talked to anyone about a punting prop before. So I cede the floor to you. How did you come up with this one?
Well, Tommy Townsend's a Gator, so maybe his name just kind of caught my eye. So I will concede that. But so his shortest punt of the game, the total's 38.5, and I'm going to go over 38.5. I think our only concern is a pooch type punt. But even at midfield, if he gets it to the 11-yard line or more inside of that, even we'd still be good there. He's averaged 47.1 yards per punt in the playoffs, and has only had 3.3 punts per game, and he was around that same number in the regular season when he averaged 46.1 yards per punt. So nothing crazy, brain-wise going on here, other than he averages more, and I'm hoping if he has a pooch, it doesn't kill us.
Gotta get one of those friendly rolls. Gotta get a friendly roll.
Yes. Gotta have that thing roll down the field. Now, B, I know it's not listed on here, but a bet that I know a lot of people love to place is MVP, like predicting the MVP for both teams. So if you had to just put your money where your mouth is for this game, if the Chiefs won, if the 49ers won, who would you bet to be the MVP in both of those scenarios?
Well, I was looking, I'm pulling it up now. I was looking at FanDuel the other day, and Mahomes was plus 140, and now he's plus 150. Now, I looked at other books. He was not that generous. So, I mean, you could make an argument that I shouldn't even bet the Chiefs, that if I like the Chiefs, I should be betting Mahomes plus 150. Now, the catch with that would be maybe Pacheco goes off. Maybe he breaks his 75-yard run, and maybe it's a lower scoring type game, and then Pacheco would have a chance. But I think I heard on the radio the other day, a running back hasn't won MVP it's been a minute. I'm forgetting who they said it was, but
James White win one?
I'm not sure. I don't have it pulled up right now. But so
I think so.
I would say Mahomes at plus 150, but I'm already kind of built in with that my Chiefs plus 2 bet. Now, I just don't think there's anybody for Kansas City who's going to win it other than Pacheco or Mahomes. And now with San Fran, maybe McCaffrey could do it, but he's only plus 450. I can't see a Kelsey or a receiver winning it. And so then you would have to be a defensive struggle and maybe a Chris Jones at 110-1 with, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, or that results in a touchdown or something at crunch time. But I don't really have a long shot that I think. Maybe if you wanted to throw some really small change on Butker at 490-1, what if he hits 2 55-yard field goals, including one to win it at the buzzer? But other than that, I just think it's Mahomes.
B, have you ever thought of, and this is, I'm just thinking of this live, and obviously your strategy is better than mine. So I'm curious, have you thought about at all finding a 49er with long odds to kind of hedge some of that Kansas City money or Kansas City spread action? Because, if you looked at, the guy that caught my eye was like Debo at plus 2,000. I could easily see if the 49ers win this game, Debo taking over. And like, I'm curious how you view that.
No, I think that's good thinking, because I'm going to be so heavily invested in Kansas City. And I'm actually seeing Debo at 25-1 at FanDuel. And that's interesting you bring that up because he is so versatile. And I want to say Hines Ward is the last wide receiver to win it. I could be wrong on that, but he played quarterback at Georgia. In fact, the only game I've ever been to between the hedges, he was the starting quarterback against the Gators. He had a touchdown pass that game. Debo can get rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and, receiving. So maybe he is a guy that could win it rather than a quarterback.
That's Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. You can find him at Brian Edwards on Twitter, or at B Edwards on Twitter. Make sure you go check out his stuff to see where he's playing for the Super Bowl. Brian, we appreciate it as always.
Thanks, fellas. Y'all have a great Super Sunday. Talk to you next week.
Yep, that's Brian Edwards. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio and Mike Lombardi coming up next. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. Have to remind you that when you're driving, hands on the wheel, eyes and focus straight ahead. The driver has one job, that is to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We are giving a call to Mike Lombardi right now to get a hold of him. He is a 30-plus year NFL exec. He currently hosts the GM Shuffle Pod, as well as he does a daily newsletter called The Daily Coach. Kind of mixes sports leadership and into your daily life. So really cool stuff there from Mike Lombardi. We will be talking to him in just a minute. We've got a prediction from Ken, 27-17. The 49ers win. I like that prediction, Ken. Purdy MVP. Let's see if we can make that happen. We'll ask Mike Lombardi now from the GM Shuffle Pod and longtime NFL exec what his thoughts are. Mike, thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate you joining us. Let's just jump right into it. One of the things that I have been so interested in with this Super Bowl matchup, and I think this is right up your alley, is the construction of the two rosters, right? Because you've got kind of the, hey, get a cheap quarterback and put guys around him with San Francisco. And then you've got the, hey, make sure you've got the guy at quarterback and figure out the rest later with Kansas City. Long term, I know we'll get to Sunday in just a minute, but long term, which of these two franchises do you like better in terms of their ability to return to this game based on how their rosters are constructed?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I think to me, the reality of it is, and I've got my feedback in my ear. I'm sorry, I can't. 1 second here. Hello?
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, I keep hearing myself. I keep hearing myself talk. I'm sorry.
No. We'll try to call you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll give Mike a call right back here. Got a little feedback in his ear there, so we'll get there. We'll get back with him in just a second. But I think it's interesting. The reason I asked him that question is because kind of the two modes that you see guys talking about in terms of putting together Super Bowl rosters. It's kind of the Russell Wilson model in terms of you get the guy on the rookie deal and then you put the team together around him because you can afford to pay guys like Debo Samuel and Bosa and guys like that. But the other side of it, you kind of got the Tom Brady model, the Aaron Rodgers model, where you've got your quarterback, you pay that guy, you keep him there long term, and then you put in the cast of characters around him. To me, that's kind of just the way these two teams got here is one of the most interesting factors in this game as we try and get back with Mike Lombardi here. Hopefully we can get a better connection, but I don't know. I guess, Andrew, how much do you think about that? Because it's something I've been thinking a weird amount about. It's been Roman Empiring my brain.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm thinking about it as much as you are, but I do think it's interesting. Now, here's where I kind of like land with a lot of these things, because as I kind of assess both of these rosters, I think, well, if any team is building for that Super Bowl, it's the 49ers. I mean, they went out and got every piece in the book to try to form a solid offensive roster. And the thing, what were they missing, right? They were missing a running back for a long time, at least one like a McCaffrey, and they got that, and that kind of like filled the big void in that offense, and with Purdy being serviceable. But then defensively, they add another piece like Chase Young in mid-season, and just look what that does. It works wonders for that team. So they've actually like built for this moment, whereas the Chiefs are kind of like, no, we know we're good enough for this moment because we have Patrick Mahomes, and our defense has stepped up to the plate. So it is a night and day difference between both organizations.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. Cam, do we have Mike back here?
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, great. How's that? Is that better, Mike?
That's a lot better. Thank you. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect. So kind of going back to the question I asked you there, in terms of roster construction, in terms of going the cheap quarterback route, like the 49ers, or the established guy and figuring it out around a high-paid quarterback like Mahomes, kind of where do you see these two teams in terms of who has the best opportunity roster-wise to get back to this point?
Well, they both do. I mean, whenever you have – and look, Purdy's an elite quarterback too. You don't average almost 10 yards a throw on an attempt without being an elite quarterback. And both teams do a really good job of understanding the cap. Both teams put priorities on certain positions. They don't overspend. So I think, to me, I think the reality of the situation is both are going to be in really good shape. And when that happens, they're going to have to re-sign Purdy to a contract. They'll have to give up some of their other luxury items within the team. But look, when you're in a good team, it really comes down to being able to find players at economic value and not overspend. And I think that's what the Chiefs will continue to do. And I think that's what the 49ers will do.
Mike, reflecting on your own experiences, what do you think sets apart teams that consistently perform well in the playoffs from those that struggled to reach that level of success?
The ones that can convert the 3rd and 2s, the ones that convert the 3rd and shorts, the ones that can have balance with their team, the one that can play right-handed and left-handed. To me, the winning in playoff games is about making critical plays at critical times. I mean, the Chiefs beat Buffalo in Buffalo. They had the ball for 22 minutes. They scored 27 points. They were very, very judicious in terms of how they maximized the time with the football. And their defense was able to create negative plays in the fourth quarter. They stopped the fake field goal, the fake punt, and they got them out of 3 and out on one series. And those two drives won the game for the Chiefs. Even though the kid Bass missed the field goal, those two other drives are what kept them in position to win that game. So I think a lot of it is just that ability to make the critical plays. But those possession down plays, right? The Chiefs only had 6 third downs in the Buffalo game. They were 1 for 6. So that told you they were moving the football on 2 downs. That's incredible. But most of the time it comes down to simply being able to convert those 3rd and shorts that you need to keep the football.
We're talking with Michael Lombardi, former NFL executive and host of the GM Shuffle Pod. Mike, you mentioned something in that first answer about Brock Purdy in terms of his status as a quarterback. I know that's been something that a lot of people have had discussions on over the course of the season in terms of how good actually is he. As somebody who did this for a living for a long time, how do you reach the conclusion that you said that Brock Purdy is an elite quarterback in his own right?
I watch the game. Nobody else does. I mean, I've done. I mean, I look at him. I mean, he's great yards after the catch. Why are the 49ers great yards after the catch? Because he's so damn accurate with the football. He throws the ball with great rhythm. He's got great timing. He throws the ball inside. He can throw it outside. He reads the coverages. He processes. One of the things we lose sight of with quarterbacks is the fact that they have to be quick-minded and quick-footed, right? He is both. He's quick-minded and he's quick-footed. People want to dismiss his athleticism, which is hogwash, because at the end of the day, last week on that long run, he got the ball down to the goal line, the 5-yard line. He's running away from Brian Branch, a second-round pick out of Alabama, and Branch can't get him on the ground. Listen to Spagnuolo talk about it. Look, the reason that nobody wants to give him credit is the people that are killing him have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to quarterbacking play. This is truly the case of some people are so far out of the race, they actually think they're in the lead.
Mike, I want to stay with Brock Purdy here because obviously he was Mr. Irrelevant and everybody passed over him. And I'm curious because you've been in so many different roles with many organizations. What was your biggest draft hit that you were a part of and draft miss over the course of your time as an NFL exec?
Mike, you still with us there?
I got that. Sure do. Yep.
Oh, Mike, so I asked, Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, what I learned at an early age in my career is it doesn't matter where we pick them. It matters how they play. That's from Bill Walsh, who I think probably is a lot smarter than a lot of these people that are killing Brock Purdy. I mean, let's be clear. I think Walsh, this game is truly a tribute to Coach Walsh. We should recognize this because these are two organizations that are built and run in the fashion of which he wanted to run them in. And both teams run the West Coast offense. But, I think to me, he taught me that a long time ago. Stop looking at where they got picked. Evaluate where they got paid. Why is Kurt Warner a better success story than Brock Purdy? Why? Kurt Warner was sleeping floors at a supermarket. Everybody loves that story. Brock Purdy, always Mr. Irrelevant. Like, what's the difference? I think a lot of it is just that people wanted Trey Lance to be a starter, and he couldn't do it.
Okay, so speaking of those two guys, obviously Purdy was the hit and Lance was the miss. In your career, who was your biggest draft hit and draft miss?
Well, I think, recently we picked Mingo when I was in Cleveland, and I thought he was going to be a better pass rusher than he ended up being. Didn't play with enough power. So that was an issue. I think when I go back, I think signing Malcolm Butler for the Patriots was a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Trading for Deion Lewis when I was with the Patriots to get him to come in and play the way he did. Draft pick wise, I mean, look, when you draft Hall of Fame players like Charles Haley, you're just really fortunate.
Mike, I'm as we get into the actual Super Bowl game here, this seems to be a lot of people leaning on the fact that Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and they just don't want to bet against that guy, which I totally understand. You were part of an organization with the Patriots and Tom Brady that people looked at very similarly. What, in your mind, is the path to victory for a team like the 49ers, who's got a really good roster, really good quarterback, but they're going up against a guy that's just really hard to beat?
Well, he's hard to beat if you don't put pressure on him. I think if you go back to the 19 Super Bowl when Tampa played him, Tampa put pressure on him. He was under duress the whole entire game. Now, remember that was a game where Eric Fisher got hurt, and they had to play the left tackle. They didn't really have a left tackle. That's the game. Now, Andy's changed what he's done completely. He's no longer holding the football. He's no longer trying to make plays down the field. They're taking what the defense gives them. They're going to try to matriculate the ball, as the great Hank Stram once said, and he gets it out of his hand. But the only thing that hurts great quarterbacks is pressure. And the Niners have built their defensive line around great rushers. And this playoffs, we haven't seen that yet.
Mike, I know you're a Bill Belichick advocate. How surprised were you that he didn't get an NFL head coaching job in this previous cycle?
Well, part of me is surprised, but the other part of me isn't. I think that Bill Walsh in 1975 told Paul Zimmerman for his book, The Thinking Man's Guide to Pro Football, that, these teams that are run by owners and general managers and presidents and people like that are very reluctant to hire somebody who has strong convictions and knows football. That keeps their job intact. So, in one sense, I'm surprised, but I think next year people will come to their senses. I don't know how you can stand in front of your team and say we're committed to winning and then not hire Bill Belichick.
We're talking with Mike Lombardi, longtime NFL executive and host of the GM Shuffle Pod. All right, I've got a unique opportunity here to ask somebody who would actually know. A theory of mine is that, and I don't even know if it's a theory, but that the quarterback position is way more dependent on the situation they get drafted to than people realize. People look at Patrick Mahomes, for instance, and say that guy would be successful anywhere, but he also went to one of the best possible situations he could have gone to with Andy Reid. How dependent, in your experience, is quarterback success on not only the coach, but the organization, the entire process around the quarterback? I feel like there's not that many guys that can transcend bad situation.
Well, let me tell you a story. So in 1979, Bill Tobin was the general manager of the Chicago Bears. And he was leaving that day of the draft, and he kissed his wife, and his wife said to him, Bill, promise me, Bill, you will draft Joe Montana if he's there. And Bill Tobin told his wife, dear, I promise you, if Joe Montana is there in the third round, we will pick him. And in the third round came, and they picked Willie McClendon. And Bill Tobin did what most of us do, didn't listen to our wives and got in trouble. Had Joe Montana gone to the Bears, he would have been great, because great players are always great. But what you're saying is true. When the system meets greatness, when the greatness makes the system even better, then it's hard to tell who's responsible for it, right? Is it Andy? Is it Mahomes? I mean, Alex Smith played good for Andy. It wasn't to this level. So I think greatness always shines, but I think when you win championships is when greatness and scheme come together.
Now, Mike, to branch right off of that, and speaking of legacies, because we spent a lot of time on the legacy conversation yesterday, how do you see this Super Bowl impacting the legacies of both coaches and star players involved?
That's a great question. So Bud Grant went to 4 Super Bowls. He lost all of them. He's in the Hall of Fame. Marv Levy went to 4 Super Bowls. He lost all of them. He's in the Hall of Fame. I think getting to a Super Bowl, you've already secured your legacy, right? I mean, it's been proven. I mean, guys go in the Hall of Fame. George Allen went to 1 Super Bowl. He's in the Hall of Fame. So I think that's a little bit of an overblown conversation. I think that for a guy like Mahomes, Vince Lombardi has the greatest saying of all. He said the greatest reward for doing is the opportunity to do more. And Mahomes is going to have a chance to do much more.
Mike, I want to branch off a little bit from the Super Bowl here and ask you more of a roster and franchise building conversation with the Chicago Bears. You mentioned them in your anecdote about Joe Montana. They've got a situation again here where they've got a quarterback that they drafted really high. They have another number 1 overall pick that they're looking at this year. How would you go through that process in terms of deciding if Justin Fields is the guy or if they need to take another bite at the apple with a quarterback at 1?
Well, I would have taken another bite at the apple. I mean, I think Fields has proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he has a hard time making throws in critical situations. He's played 3 years in the league. This isn't like he hasn't played. We've watched him for 3 years. We keep making excuses for him, and has he gotten better? Sure, he's gotten a little bit better. He's a great athlete running the football. But in terms of timing, execution, reading all the things that have to go in to making himself a great player, it hasn't happened. Lamar Jackson took over for Joe Flacco his rookie year and led Baltimore to the playoffs. C.J. Stroud starts as a rookie and led the Texans to the playoffs. Like, everybody keeps saying, be patient, be patient. Why? Great players show up. Great. You don't have to make an excuse for them. You didn't need an excuse for Lamar Jackson. You didn't need an excuse for C.J. Stroud. They just played really well. But we keep making excuses for Justin Fields. It's really not a complicated conversation. They said, well, we got to get a better wide receiver around them. Okay, great. So they get DJ Moore. Wonderful. That's a great trade. I think they did a wonderful job on that. In 2 years ago, Fields averaged 7.1 yards per attempt without Moore. Last year with Moore, he averaged 6.9.
Now, Mike, can any blame be put on the coaching staff there and not utilizing him properly?
That's the greatest. Because people don't understand football. That's the bailout. It's like when people say, well, Belichick can't win without Brady. That, you know, that's really, or, you know, this is what happens. The coach is obviously a difference maker, but look, the Bears have tried everything. Luke Getsy's a really good coach. He got fired for this, just like a lot of guys got fired because of Blake Bortles. How many guys did Blake Bortles get fired in Jacksonville?
Plenty.
That's a good point. Mike, I don't know how much you have gone into the kind of scouting and looking at the guys coming up in this upcoming draft. Obviously, Caleb Williams gets all the attention, but if you've started looking at these guys at all yet, is there someone besides Caleb Williams that jumps out as somebody you really like?
Yeah, I mean, I love Drake May, but I haven't really studied it. I think I got to get more into it. But I think there's a lot of possibilities within the draft, and you know, a lot of it. I think quarterbacks are a hard position to evaluate because you got to understand what are the key ingredients to making a great quarterback. And everybody wants arm strength. Everybody wants this, you know, elite arm. And I think ultimately it's about rhythm and timing. It's about being able to play quick-minded and quick-footed. Can you make a second play? You know, it's one thing to run around. It's another thing to run around and make a play like Mahomes does. Mahomes will make plays with his feet, but what scares every defense coordinator in the National Football League is Mahomes buying more time and creating a second play off the first play, and then all of a sudden they're down the field.
Mike, you've been in the game since 1984. You've seen the landscape of pro football change over the years to what it is today. Can you discuss any memorable experiences or moments that have kind of shaped your perspective on football and leadership?
I mean, I've been really blessed. I've been around some incredibly talented people. I wrote Gridiron Genius. It was a tribute to Coach Walsh, Belichick, Al Davis. Those are the geniuses that I worked for. And every day that I reminisce about my career, I think about driving Bill Walsh around in the car and learning football from him, learning life lessons from him, telling me not to be a guy with a whistle around my neck, and learn leadership, learn about the business of football, understand how to lead people, understand how to think divergently. You know, those are lessons that have taken me as far as I've gone, luckily, because without that, you know, I would have not been that way. I grew up a fat kid on the Jersey Shore, you know, idolizing Bruce Springsteen, trying to cross Highway 9. And once I crossed Highway 9, I got to Coach Belichick and Coach Walsh, and it made a difference in my life.
Mike, you know, that kind of leads me into my next question is, you know, you've got this newsletter, The Daily Coach, that takes a lot of those sports leadership principles and ideas and tries to help people apply them to kind of their normal everyday lives. What made you want to do something like that that's a little bit different than both what you had done in kind of working in NFL front offices and in some of your other football focused media work? What made you want to kind of give a different perspective on sports leadership to everybody?
You know, I was having lunch one day with the great George Raveling, who was a former basketball coach at Iowa, Washington State, and USC. One of the greatest human beings of all time, a really well-read man. Was on the stage when Dr. King actually gave the I Have a Dream speech. He owned that speech up until he gave it to Villanova 2 years ago. And we were both reading a book called The $1 Trillion Coach about Bill Campbell, and all the people from Google wanted to pay tribute to his advice. And we both looked at each other and said, you know, everybody needs a coach. You know, if Bill Campbell needs a coach, if Steve Jobs needs a coach, if everybody needs a coach, then we need a coach. And I think ultimately that's why we started the Daily Coach. And it's a labor of love. We've made no money from it. We haven't taken a nickel. We've not promoted it other than when I do radio appearances like this in Omaha. And it's grown to 40,000 email subscribers every day, because I think there is a need that everybody has to hear a message of positivity, to understand that we fight resistance every day, to understand that we have to become a better leader every day, to understand that people are counting on us, whether it's as a husband, a wife, a father, a son, or a daughter. And so that's what inspires us. And for me, I've won 3 Super Bowls. I couldn't be happier about my career, but what gives me the most joy is the Daily Coach.
Well, Mike, one more thing to branch off of what you were just saying there. You've written a couple of books. Explain what those are and where people can find them.
Gridiron Genius is a football book that's really about culture, right? So it's a book about what I learned from Coach Walsh, what I've learned from Belichick, Al Davis, and it's a journey of really organizational football. I would think most owners would want to read it. I've sent it to a lot of NFL owners. I haven't gotten one thank you note back for it, so obviously they don't read it. And that book to me was a thank you to those people. This book that I've written recently, Football Done Right, is the history of the NFL. The story I told you about Montana is in the book. It's a tribute to, and I wanted to honor some of the people that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, like Brett Musburger, Howard Cosell. They advanced this game tremendously. They never even won a Roselle Award for their work. And then Marty Schottenheimer, 200 career NFL wins, regular season, only one of 8 men that have done that. He can't even get into the Hall of Fame. So for me, it's a way to try to educate the fans of the game, where these coaching trees come from, how the power of television helped make this an incredible sport, and then honor those top 100 players of all time.
That's Mike Lombardi. He is a former NFL executive. He is the host of the GM Shuffle Pod and founder of The Daily Coach. Mike, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can catch up again sometime.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Really appreciate Mike Lombardi joining us in that last segment. Glad we were able to work through some technical issues on the phone there to get him for most of that first segment of the 9 o'clock hour. If you missed it, make sure you go back and listen to the podcast. Some really good stuff there from the former NFL exec for about 30 plus years. Really a ton of experience there. It is now time, though. We've kind of put Mike Lombardi on the hot seat there. It's time for us to sit on that Hurrdat hot seat now. Andrew, would you like to lead us off?
Let's kick this thing off with a topic question. And this was prompted by Michael Severe on Twitter last week. What are 3 topics you can talk about for 30 minutes with zero prep?
Ooh, okay. So this is a good one. This is as sports talk radio hosts, there's probably several things in our wheelhouse that we can get to. Nebraska football is an easy one. I'm going to take that off the table. Creighton basketball is an easy one. I'm going to take that off the table. So I'm going to go non-stuff that we cover every day. Because that's a little too easy for us, right?
Okay.
I could talk about 90s baseball, late 90s baseball specifically, for a half hour, no questions asked, specifically the steroid era and the use of steroids in baseball. I could go an easy 30 minutes on late 90s steroid use in baseball.
Specifically the Yankees winning World Series, right?
No, we don't need to talk about that. No,
that's the late 90s though, right?
No, don't need to talk about that. I'm thinking like Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, like late 90s, early 2000s baseball, steroids place in baseball in that era. Like, 30 minutes may not be able to contain all my thoughts.
All right, that's one for you. One for me, obvious, it's sports betting.
Sure.
I could have got sports betting nonstop all day long. I could tell you what lines are, what the spread is for certain games. I could go from the explanation process to parlays to all that jazz. That's my wheelhouse. That's my forte. Sports betting would be it for me.
Ooh, that's a good one. Another one for me is definitely I'm gonna use kind of a large umbrella here to make sure I catch everything, but like strength and conditioning. I could talk about strength and conditioning for 30 minutes, half hour, easy. Now, I'm including not just team specific strength and conditioning. I'm talking about like powerlifting. I'm throwing under there, the whole umbrella of sort of like performance-based fitness, right? So not just like going to the gym and working out or whatever, although I could talk about that for a long time too. But in terms of like trying to work out for a specific athletic goal, whatever that is, I could talk about that for ages. It's something that I did for a long time with the basketball teams I worked with, but I have very strong feelings about strength and conditioning. So that's an easy one for me.
My second one, movies or movie quotes I could talk about nonstop for 30 minutes. And I will even, I'll cut it down a little bit more because like quotes, like I could talk about like Friends quotes for 30 minutes, no doubt. I mean, I've seen every episode at least 6 times, but in terms of like the movies, the true stories and sports documentaries, I could talk about those easily for 30 minutes.
Okay, fair. Yeah. Movies is a good one. I'm a big movie nerd. And so there's a lot of different movie topics that, like, if you want to, if you want to talk about like the Infinity Saga in the MCU, like I'm all over. I think I compared all the Husker football units to Marvel movies at one point.
You did.
So,
you did.
There is I could really do.
Meanwhile, I did ice cream flavors.
Absolutely. We have to talk about the things we're passionate about. So I could definitely talk about Marvels. Listen, like phase 4 and beyond, like I'm not talking about that, but phase 1 through 3, I could talk about. I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I could talk about Star Wars ad nauseum. There is, I'm trying to think if there's anything besides movies, because I don't want to copy you here.
You can keep it, because like for me, the movies that really stand out true story wise are like, let's go with like Hacksaw Ridge. You have other specific war movies, and then or like the based on like true event movies, not like totally true stories.
Sure.
There's what's the movie with Tom Hanks and the plane that hits the birds? They land on the Hudson.
Oh, it's Sully. Is that the one?
Sully, yeah. Like, so that like is based on true events, but obviously isn't like, oh wow, this is exactly how it happened. So movies like that, I could just like sit, and if you knew a little bit about similar true stories or sports documentaries, and we could just bounce ideas off of one another, I could easily do that for 30 minutes.
So I thought of another one, because this is something that it was more so in college, but I could still do an easy 30 minutes on it, is time travel. I could talk about, I've got like a
really
weird, like theoretical physics time travel rabbit hole that I've gone down in the past. Like it's part of the reason I like Interstellar so much. It is, time. I could go on some deep dives on time travel with you. I could give you an easy half hour on time travel.
You're like a dang burrowing owl. You have so many rabbit holes. It's insane.
I do. It's a little bit, I've got a lot of like really strange, very specific interests that I've spent way too much time on.
My last one would be rookie trading cards. In specific,
okay.
The new Bowman Chrome baseball cards, or the Panini Prism football and NBA rookie cards. If you laid out, like, I could talk about the different LaMelo Ball rookie cards, or I was looking up OG Anunoby last night. I have a Fernando Tatis Jr. rookie. And if anybody was wondering, his Bowman Chrome rookie is him wearing a White Sox jersey.
Oh, interesting.
So it was before he got shipped off over to San Diego. So I also like talking about rookies today, because I think a lot of people forget where they came from before they actually became something. So Wainwright, for example, Adam Wainwright, pitcher for the Cardinals, actually right here on the wall. And he started his career with the Braves. And so if you look up rookie cards of Adam Wainwright, it'll be him in his Braves uniform. And that Topps was popular back in like the 2000 to 2010-ish range. So that's the card that you're probably looking for. But I could go into a deep dive of rookie cards and what to look for and what their values are, just based off of one website that I look at constantly.
Okay, I've got some follow-ups on the rookie card questions. Number one, this is a little trivia question. Do you know who the White Sox traded for and gave up Fernando Tatis?
No. I'm going to guess.
It's bad. It's pretty bad.
Is there a popular name?
It's a name that you would likely know, yes. I mean, you know the name. I wouldn't call it popular, but he did play in the state of Missouri.
Oh. Well, now the only person coming in my brain is Max Scherzer. Now, when you say state of Missouri, like college or
professionally?
So is that like either Kansas City or St. Louis?
Correct. Yes.
Is it a Cardinal?
It is not a Cardinal.
Okay, well, you could have just said he played for the Royals.
Well, listen, I wasn't trying to be so specific, but
gosh, the Padres. Oh man, this is I don't even know.
he's got a good nickname. I don't know that it's an appropriate nickname for him. It's not inappropriate for the air or anything, but
the only name that's hitting my head right now is James Shields, and I know that's
nailed.
Is that right?
Nailed it.
What?
He was traded for James Shields after Shields' time in Kansas City, which was brief in that 2014 year.
Wow.
He went to, or 2013, 2014 in Kansas City. Then he went to the Padres. The Padres traded him to the White Sox for Fernando Tatis Jr.
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
They traded a mid-30s James Shield for Fernando Tatis Jr.
Ravi, if I can add one more. You remember when Lombardi said there was a story about, hey, I told my wife, or my wife told me to draft Joe Montana
Yep.
to the Bears? Well, Fernando Tatis is a legend in a Cardinals uniform.
Yep.
He told the Cardinals to draft his kid.
Oh.
They said they would, and then they
not.
didn't draft him.
Fernando Tatis, only player in Major League history with 2 grand slams in the same inning.
Against the same pitcher.
A little, how does the pitcher stay in the inning that long?
I don't know, but I know it was against like Ho Park or Chin Ho Park.
Jan-Ho Park?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, for the Dodgers, I believe, at the time.
Yep.
Coming up next, we got more Hurrdat Hot Seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up the show here on a Thursday on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Richmond. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. The YouTube chat lively and a good time as always. Had some interesting guys chiming in on what they could talk about for a half hour. Ken says vampire movies and martial arts. Okay, interesting. Like that.
That is a cool combination.
Amazing. Daniel says, besides Nebraska football, he could do Nebraska basketball, 86 Mets. We don't need to hear anything about the 86 Mets, Daniel. We don't need that. It's fine. Anything Steelers or the Showtime Lakers. Ooh, Showtime Lakers is an interesting rabbit hole to go down. That is all of the, even just off the court, the coaching dynamics of like how Pat Riley got in there. If you watch the short-lived HBO series Showtime, you got into a little bit about that as well. But Showtime Lakers are fascinating.
Yeah, good squad.
Yeah, not bad.
Good squad.
Not bad. All right, back to Hurrdat Hot Seat here. All right, Andrew, I was trying to figure out the numbers on this to make it a tempting situation for you on either side of this, okay? So I'm
ready for it.
I'm going to put you in. You just have to pick who wins, not who you want to win, not who you think will, not who you like thought would win going into it, but based on the situation I give you,
okay,
you have to pick which scenario is most likely to win. The 49ers are up by 14 at the start of the fourth quarter, or the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes have the ball down 8 at their own 10-yard line with a minute to go. Who wins in that scenario?
The 49ers up 14.
Okay, how much time would Mahomes need for you to change that answer? Or how small would the 49ers lead have to be for it to be a harder answer for you? Could you answer?
Yeah, I think I need to lower the point total for the 49ers to make that a little bit more difficult.
So 10? Is it 10? Or is it
10's more interesting. Do the Chiefs have the ball?
Chiefs have the ball on their own 10-yard line, down 8. So you have to get the 2-point conversion.
Right. No, I meant like in the scenario with 10 points. Who's got the football?
I hadn't thought of that. Let's say if it's down 10, the 49ers have the ball. If it's down 14, the Chiefs have the ball.
I still feel confident in the 49ers if they have the ball. If you were to tell me the Chiefs have the ball in both scenarios and the Chiefs are down 10, I would rather have the full fourth quarter down 10 with Patrick Mahomes than I would the 8 points with a minute to go. And now, look, I know Mahomes has done it before. I know he's led plenty of 2-minute drives down the field. But I also have a lot of faith in this 49ers defense.
Okay.
And I think that they are going to make Mahomes uncomfortable in this game. And with that amount of pressure, it'll be difficult for him to make that final drive. So give me the buffer room, give me the points. I would take Mahomes down 10 in the fourth quarter versus the 8 minutes or the 8 points with 1 minute to go.
What if I gave you the full 2 minute, like a 2 minute?
If you gave me the 2 minutes, I would let Mahomes take it down the field in 2 minutes.
You let Mahomes cook it with
because I don't even think he needs timeouts.
Yeah, that's the thing is if it's 1 minute, it probably kind of depends a little bit on the timeout situation because he's probably working middle of the field, things like that. If it's 2 minutes, you don't need timeouts.
Right. And, knowing that they have to score a touchdown too, that's different than a lot of Mahomes' final drives.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of those drives ended in field goals.
Yeah, you got get in a field goal range. You let your guy take care of it. Okay, I was trying to find I think I was close. I was probably a little off. I was probably a little high on points, a little light on time. But I was trying to find the scenario that would make it tempting because Patrick Mahomes scares the ever-loving
GCs out of you,
everything out of me. But you've also kind of got that weird scenario with Kyle Shanahan, a lead in the Super Bowl. Like you're not super comfy with that situation. I think it's an interesting thought exercise to kind of put yourself in because I'll be honest. Patrick Mahomes lives rent-free in my head right now.
I was going to say, I don't think any situation makes you feel comfortable. No matter what. But if I had to choose one over the other, I'd rather have the 49ers with the football either up 10 or up 14 versus watching Mahomes lead a final drive and have to just sweat out those final 2 minutes, which will end up being 15 minutes, but more like 15 years off your life.
Yeah, 100%. Like as a 49ers fan, I definitely take scenario one, like up 2 touchdowns. You hope it never gets to the point. Like if you're the 49ers, the thing that you are trying to do most in this game is I think get off to a fast start so that it kind of forces Mahomes and the Chiefs' hands a little bit to not be able to lean on Pacheco as much. They kind of feel like they have to get the passing game going a little bit faster, and that way you make them a little bit more one-dimensional. And B, you do not want this a one-possession game with Patrick Mahomes with the ball in his hand. Like that is the two things that I'm trying to avoid here is a slow start like they had in the first 2 games and letting Mahomes have the ball in a one-possession game as the clock is winding down. Those are the things that are giving me nightmares this last couple of weeks, and that's all I want to avoid. Just let's avoid those things.
It's all right, man. All I need to do is bet on the Chiefs and bet on Mahomes to throw 3 touchdowns, and it won't happen. So as long as I put my money on the Chiefs, they'll lose.
Well,
so
please do that for me then.
I'll help you out. I'll help you out this weekend.
I actually thought my idea with B. Edwards was kind of good to hedge if you bet Chiefs to kind of hedge it with an MVP from the 49ers.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Because you're going to get what? You're going to get minus 110 on the Chiefs spread at +2.
Yes.
And then you get plus money. So you can make up a lot of your ground if you're putting, as B was, a ton of your
or you
capital.
could lose a lot.
No, you could lose I mean, that's why they call it gambling, right? There's
Amen.
Amen. I believe you are up next.
So, we were talking about the NBA and Showtime Lakers, so this had me thinking of this question. I saw a sports card that surfaced the other day. It was a signed MJ, LeBron, and Kobe sports card. It was one card, but all 3 of them parallel to one another with their signatures on the card. So here's the scenario, though.
Okay.
You have to replace one of the autographs with someone else. Who are you replacing on that card?
Well, so I'm going to go with my personal preference here over value, right? Because there's other scenarios where I could probably make it more valuable. Like if somehow you were able to get like a Bill Russell on that card or a Wilt Chamberlain on that card, you can make it more valuable. I'm just going to go with what I would like to have the most. And so I love MJ. He's not going anywhere. I love Kobe. He's not going anywhere. I acknowledge the greatness of LeBron, but I don't have really any emotional ties to him whatsoever. So he's out. He's gone. A guy that I have obvious, very strong emotional ties to is my guy, Wardell Stephen Curry II. We're putting him in for LeBron. Again, not for value, for my own personal preference. Where are you going?
Man, you jumped to that so quick.
You need a little more time to think about it.
Well, so it's funny because like I was a huge Curry fan until everybody became a Curry fan. And so then I'm like, I'm not rooting for Steph Curry anymore. Like I love Steph Curry, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm repping his t-shirt jersey.
Yeah.
If I had to replace one, and I'm thinking about this for like, because it's interesting. I thought a couple of different things, but this would tremendously lower the value. You could remove MJ from the card and put Shaq on it, and then make it like a Lakers card. And so like that could have like good value to that market of LeBron, Kobe, and Shaq. But removing MJ from any card seems like a sin.
Yeah, you have to come on.
so I'm not going to ultimately land on that. I'll probably remove Kobe. I'll keep the two quote unquote GOATs on the card. And if I had to replace Kobe with a player, man, because maybe Larry Bird.
Oh, I am a big Larry Bird guy. I love Larry Bird.
Larry Bird's one. Maybe, you mentioned Wilt Chamberlain. That's a really good one just to add to that card. But how much more value does Wilt give you than Kobe?
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know, probably a little bit because he's not with us anymore, although Kobe's not either, obviously. But Wilt, I feel like, is more rare because he's just older. Like, I feel like there's probably more Kobe autographs out there in circulation.
Yeah, I would probably just go Larry Bird. I think that's a close second.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a bad idea to make the card an all Lakers card and then try to sell it to a Lakers fan.
That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of it as as an all Lakers card. I know, obviously, I just don't ever think of LeBron as like a Laker guy, right? Like he plays there, but he's not like a Laker. Like Kobe's a Laker, right? Like Magic is a Laker. I don't really think of LeBron as like, that's a Laker guy right there. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're saying. LeBron is a Cav, right? To everybody, LeBron's a Cav. I don't care if anybody wants to say Miami, like you can, whatever, but LeBron's a Cav.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of either a Cav or like a mercenary is how I view LeBron.
Yeah, but the Curry is a close second to who I would put on a card.
I wanted to ask you this when you were talking about the cards earlier, and I forgot to, because you mentioned the Fernando Tatis card. Do you have another? Is that your best card, or do you have another one that's like, oh, this is like my crown jewel?
It's not my best card for one.
Is it your favorite? Do you have?
It's one of my favorites because it's a rare card. Thinking back right now at all the rookie cards that I have a Paul Goldschmidt rookie PSA 10.
Okay.
So that is like the best of the best grades. I have a Yadier Molina PSA 9.
Okay.
What would be my rarest card?
I've got a Michael Jordan rookie. It's not one. It's not like the super.
Not a Fleer, right?
No, it's not the super valuable one. It's
right.
It's like, I think it's a Topps. I think it's a good one, but it's not like the one. I've also got a Ken Griffey rookie that I love, and a Greg Maddux Cubs rookie one.
Oh, that's good. So my best, probably Nolan Gorman autograph card.
Okay, there we go. We'll be back tomorrow.